Yes, sir.
In Friday, when when the men wear the jalaba, we know that is a special day. Is a religion.
Indeed, on Fridays, Moroccan men wear jalabas because it's a language.
Yes.
You cannot go to the mosque, even if you can, of course, but it's preferable to use the same language that everyone uses. That's of the jalaba, the white jalaba, not a pink jalaba, for example. Because if you wear pink jalaba, everyone will just mock you. A white jalaba is more acceptable because it's a language. It's a language that everyone understands. It's a communication. And you cannot communicate with people using Chinese. A pink jalaba is like Chinese. No one can understand it. So that's a language. We indeed identify ourselves because we expect the other to understand us and to accept us. That's why we put white jalabas on Fridays. So as you can see, the I and the other, as far as visual communication is concerned, depends on visual images. You don't need words. On Fridays, you don't really need words. The white jalaba is sufficient. Okay? The other thing that I would like to develop, and that Berger mentions, is how images capture a scene or a movement, and how images, let's say, select given moments or scene. So John Berger believes that images So again, this is a very interesting argument that he raises. And either you are a photographer, or a painter, or even someone who is taking a selfie. It's the same. So when you are a photographer or a painter, you are creating images. But actually, you are selecting or recording some scenes or some events or some movements. In other words, you are narrating history. It's as if you are telling people, this is history. And I can give you examples. Years ago, in China, there was a famous photo of a man dressed in white shirt and a black trousers stopping a tank. So the photographer selected and recorded that particular scene. Why? Why did he focus? Do you know this image? You don't. So please, when you go home, do Google the Tiananmen Square, and you will surely see this picture because it's a famous photo, a famous one. So what does that mean? To focus on only that young man right in the middle of the Tiananmen Square and stopping a chain of tanks. What does it imply as far as history is concerned?
Resistance.
Resistance. What else?
Peace.
Not peace.
Willingness of peace.
Willingness to change.
Revolution.
Courage.
Courage. So actually that photographer, and also that man, but particularly that photographer, selected this particular moment or this particular scene because for him this is the beginning of a new history in China. The history of maybe a revolution, resistance, change. Of course, all this did not happen because China has not changed. But what about Bouazizi? And the picture or the image or the photo of Bouazizi setting fire on himself. Did it change history or not?
Yes.
It did.
Yes.
That photographer who selected Bouazizi's image actually was writing history, recording history, a new history, not that of Ben Ali, but that of the Tunisian people. Images, once again, are not just images, but they are history. Okay. Something else that John Berger also raises is on page 11. I would like someone to read from the top of the page. Yes, when an image is.
Yet when an image is presented as a work of art, the way people look at it is affected by a whole series of learned assumptions about art. Assumptions concerning beauty, truth, genius, civilization, form, status, taste, etc.
Carry on.
Many of these assumptions no longer accord with the world as it is. The world as it is more than pure objective fact. It includes consciousness out of truth with the present. These assumptions obscure the past. They mystify rather than clarify. The past is never there waiting to be discovered, to be recognized for exactly what it is. History always constitutes the relation between a present and its past. Consequently, fear of the present leads to a mystification of the past. The past is not for living in. It is a web of conclusions from which we draw in order to act. Culture, mystification of the past, entails a double work. Works of art are made unnecessarily remote, and the past offers us fewer conclusions to complete connection.
Thank you very much. What does that mean? In your own words. How could images be conditioned by our assumptions? Did you read this article? So what does that section mean? How could images be conditioned by our assumptions?
The way we understand these concepts is reflected in the pictures we create.
No.
For example, as Muslims, when we see a mosque, it's something which is a holy, but for others, it's just an architecture.
That's an assumption. Or?
Because what we see is affected by our knowledge. So everyone has his own perception.
Culture. Or culture. 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 Not knowledge. I would say culture, not knowledge.
Because our assumption affects our image, and when we see the image, we cannot present history by these images because they are unreliable.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think the moment the personal background works on us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Pictures are contextualized.
Not only this. So here again we will explore how images and assumptions are interrelated. Images and assumptions are interrelated. Assumptions are some beliefs that we consider valuable and precious, even if we don't examine them critically. So this is an assumption. An assumption is a belief that something is precious, sacred, valuable, even if it's not critically analyzed. Images are constantly dependent on our assumptions. That is, the way we interpret images depends on our assumptions. Some of these assumptions could be beauty, truth, civilization, taste, etc. So, what is, for example, beauty, as an example? So, the definition of beauty varies a lot from one context to another. That is, from one assumption to another. And if we try to be more precise, what is female beauty, for example? We can at least find two, but there are so many different definitions. We can find at least two different assumptions about how female beauty looks like. If we do such research in the West, I am sure that female beauty will be described in such terms like slim, sexy, independent, liberal, etc., etc., etc. This is how female beauty is described in the Western context. All these are assumptions. But if you move, let's say, to some other context, like non-Western context, like, let's say, Moroccan culture, I am sure that all these assumptions will be probably rejected and replaced by other adjectives.
Yes.
Does it mean that beauty is different? Yes, it is different because of these assumptions. Beauty it's always there, but it's in our eyes. We define beauty because of our eyes. And what are our eyes? Our eyes are assumptions. All the cultural assumptions. All the cultural assumptions we have acquired all along our socialization, cultural upbringing, etc., make us believe in some assumptions like beauty, taste, etc. Once again, this is the main lesson of ways of seeing. We see things because of our assumptions, because of our belonging, and not because the image is independent or the image is objective. No, the image is there, but it depends also on us. All right? And also what we should probably develop further in this notion of assumptions is how assumptions are created. John Berger also tells us that most assumptions mystify.
Clarifies.
So most assumptions mystify and not clarify meaning. What does this mean? That's assumptions. This is what he says on page again 11. They
Mystify.
many of these assumptions no longer accord with the word as it is. Out of true, over true with the present, these assumptions obscure the past. They mystify rather than clarify. So what does it mean that assumptions mystify rather than clarify? How could assumptions mystify? And what is to mystify? It is to create a kind of myth,
Yes.
right? A myth. A myth. It's not really a scientific truth, but it's just a mythical assumption. So how could sometimes assumptions mystify our way of seeing? How could assumptions affect our eyes? I have already explained it, but I am only expecting you to say it in your own words.
So it does not make us see the real meaning of the painting or the picture.
So what do we see then?
It's
A filter.
Filter.
A filter. A cultural filter.
Due to culture. Due to
Yes.
culture.
Due to culture, due to assumptions, we have a filter. And it's this filter that, let's say, guides our sight. So this is what John Berger is trying to say. He's trying to say that these assumptions, which are cultural constructs, are actually filters. And you know what is a filter? Of course, a filter could be an example, a colorful filter. Imagine that I am showing you a film and I use a black filter. You will see all the images in black. If I use a red filter, you will see most of the images in red. So this is what most, let's say, professional photographers do when you want to modify the image. They use filters. The same applies to our assumptions. We have some kind of invisible filters, and these filters are the result of our cultural upbringing, or what he calls our assumptions. So these assumptions mystify and they don't clarify. Example. What does that mean? Yes. What does it symbolize? No, I'm asking you to tell me assumptions. Mystical assumptions. What does it symbolize? Aha, that's not what a Christian would say. I am asking you to give me assumptions, mystical assumptions. Crucifixion, yes.
Devotion.
Devotion. What else?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. Redemption.
Purity.
Purity, yes.
Christian war. Christian war.
Or rebirth. Redemption, rebirth. Salvation. Now, all these are assumptions that Christianity has created to make of this tragedy not a tragedy, but a sacred moment. This is what John Berger was trying to say. John Berger was trying to tell us that all these religious icons in a church are based on assumptions and on mystification. And the best example, he was actually analyzing, if you can remember, a very, let's say, I would say, full or replete painting where there are a lot of things happening, and among them there was Jesus carrying the cross. So for him, this cross to the church means devotion, sacrifice, redemption, salvation, etc., etc., because it is a way of mystification. But for the painter, it was not this. What was it? Can you remember what he was saying?
He was telling a story.
What kind of story? Hmm? Pain. What else?
Torture.
What else? Not judgment.
Punishment.
I don't know whether it's punishment. Grief, yes. So, watch the film again, and I'm sure you will pay attention to it. So, what John Berger, or the painter, I can't remember his name, but the painter of that particular work, as far as the cross is concerned, was not telling us that the cross stands for devotion and all this, but it simply stands for pain, torture, and for a very secular representation of Christ. This is how images can work. They can work either to mystify or to clarify. In other words, ways of seeing. Not only one, but so many possible ways. What I said about the cross can also be applied to so many other images where the possibilities of interpretation and manipulation are multiple. Finally, John Berger says this very interesting argument, and it's simply the following. Assumptions mystify the past because these images were produced by a minority of people who have the privilege to define history and art. That's again on page 11, and it's just summarizing my own words. You can go back and read it at home. So, assumptions mystify the past when these images were produced by a minority of people who had the privilege to define history and art. So, images, according to him, and particularly in painting, were a way of mystification. They were a way of mystification created by the very few, by the very few who had the privilege to create history or art. Those who had the privilege to hire a painter were, of course, the very few. And of course, when you hire, this is how actually painting used to work in the past. Painting in the Renaissance and in the coming centuries was indeed a question of patronage. When you are rich enough, you hire a painter and you tell him, please, I would like you to paint my house, myself, my family, my palace, and I pay you. The church was the most dominant, let's say, patron. And so, in all the churches, you would find a lot of paintings on the walls. Why? Simply because the very few people who had enough money were creating history and they were creating art. This art, according to John Berger, today should be revisited, re-examined. Otherwise, mystification will be on and on. So this is the main lesson we can learn from ways of seeing as far as the first chapter is concerned. So please, when you go back home, reread the article in the light of what I was trying to explain. Watch the video again and again and again. Take notes. And prepare questions if you want.